Commander stood at the viewing deck of his warship and looked at the small blue planet spinning slowly in the darkness of space. He had conquered many worlds in his long life. He had watched civilizations fall under the might of the Empire. He had seen species beg for mercy and others try to fight before breaking like glass under pressure. This blue planet called Earth looked no different from the others. It looked weak and fragile and ready to fall. The Ascending Shadow was the finest warship in the fleet. It carried enough firepower to burn entire continents and enough soldiers to occupy any world. Behind it floated 300 more vessels of various sizes, all armed and ready for the invasion that had planned for months. The humans of Earth had no idea what was coming for them. Lieutenant walked up to the commander and handed him a data tablet. She was young for an officer, barely 200 years old, but she had sharp eyes and a quick mind. Valued her reports because she never told him what he wanted to hear. She told him the truth. "Commander, I have compiled everything we know about the humans," said. "The information is troubling in some ways." Took the tablet and began reading. Humans lived short lives, sometimes less than 100 years. Their bodies were soft and broke easily. They needed to eat multiple times each day, and they spent a third of their existence sleeping. They had no natural weapons like claws or fangs. They could not survive in extreme temperatures. They fought among themselves constantly over resources and beliefs and borders drawn on maps. "They are weak," said. "I see nothing troubling here." "It is not their biology that concerns me," replied. "It is the warning from the Galactic Council." Made a sound of disgust. The Galactic Council was an ancient assembly of the oldest species in the known universe. They watched and recorded and occasionally offered advice, but they never acted. They were observers, nothing more, had little respect for observers. "What warning?" he asked. Touched the tablet and brought up a transmission that had arrived 3 days ago. The message was short and carried the seal of the council, a mark that was never used lightly. "Do not engage humanity in warfare," read aloud. "That is all it says. No explanation." I requested one. Their response was strange, paused and looked uncomfortable. They said that humans do not know how to surrender. Laughed. It was a harsh sound that echoed through the viewing deck. He had heard similar things about other species before invasions. The proud warriors of VII had claimed they would never surrender. They lasted 2 weeks. The hive mind of the collective had sworn to fight to the last drone. They broke in 3 days when targeted their queen. "Every species knows how to surrender," said. "It is simply a matter of applying enough pressure. When their cities burn and their children cry and their hope dies, they will kneel like all the others." Did not look convinced, but she said nothing more. She was a good officer and she knew when to hold her tongue. The second in command of the Ascending Shadow approached from the tactical station. He was old even by standards, with scales that had faded too and eyes that had seen too much death. He moved slowly, but his mind remained sharp. "Commander, may I speak freely?" asked. "You always do," replied. "I have been researching the humans as well. I found records from the collective." The name made pause. The collective had been a powerful civilization, nearly as advanced as the. They had controlled dozens of star systems and commanded fleets that numbered in the thousands. 50 years ago, they had attempted to invade Earth. "What records?" asked. "Combat recordings, transmissions, final messages." His voice grew quiet. "They no longer exist, Commander. There is empty. Their colonies are abandoned. Their entire species vanished within 5 years of engaging the humans." "That is impossible. They had superior technology, superior numbers." "Yes," agreed, "they did." Stared at his old friend for a long moment. He wanted to dismiss this as exaggeration or error. Species did not simply vanish after losing a war. They were conquered and absorbed, or they were reduced and controlled. Complete extinction was rare and required deliberate effort over generations. "Show me these recordings," ordered. transferred the files to the main display. The viewing deck filled with images of battle. Soldiers, tall and armored, advanced on human positions. The humans were smaller and their weapons looked primitive by comparison. The first minutes of footage showed what expected. Forces pushed forward while humans fell back. Then something changed. A human soldier, wounded and bleeding, crawled toward a squad. The soldier was clearly dying. There was no chance of survival and no possibility of victory. Yet the human kept moving, kept dragging itself forward with one arm while the other clutched something against its chest. The explosion killed 11 soldiers. The recording continued. A human vehicle, burning and destroyed, rolled into a supply depot and detonated. A group of humans, surrounded and out of ammunition, charged at positions with nothing but blades and rocks and bare hands. A human pilot flew a damaged aircraft directly into a command ship. Watched in silence. He had seen bravery before. He had seen desperation. This was something different. These humans were not fighting to win. They were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to make their enemy pay for every inch of ground in blood. "The won every major battle," said quietly. "They occupied Earth for 2 years. They controlled the cities and the resources and the population. And still the humans fought. They fought from ruins and forests and mountains. They fought with stolen weapons and improvised explosives. They never stopped." "How did the fall?" asked. "Attrition. The humans bled them dry. Every year the losses mounted while human resistance grew stronger. Eventually, they retreated to their own space. The humans followed them." Turned away from the display, he looked again at the blue planet below. It seemed so peaceful from this distance, so harmless. "We are not he said finally. "We will not make their mistakes." He gave the order for the fleet to advance. 300 warships moved toward Earth, ready to begin the conquest of humanity. Watched the planet grow larger in the viewing port. She thought about the Council's warning. She thought about thee and their empty worlds. She wondered if they were about to make the greatest mistake in their history. The invasion had begun. The human vessel Relentless floated near the red planet that humans called Mars. It was a single ship, small by galactic standards, carrying 200 crew members and enough weapons to defend against pirates and small raiders. Against the Armada, it was nothing, a pebble facing an avalanche. Captain Jack stood on the bridge of his ship and watched 300 alien warships emerge from faster-than-light travel. The sensors screamed warnings. The tactical officer called out enemy positions and weapon systems. The communications officer tried to reach Earth Command, but the distance made real-time conversation impossible. Jack was 53 years old. He had hair at his temples and lines around his eyes from years of squinting at stars. He had served in the human navy for 30 years and commanded the Relentless for the last 8. He had a wife named waiting for him on Earth and 2 grown children who had families of their own. He thought about them now as he looked at the alien fleet. "Captain, they outnumber us 5,000 to 1, his first officer said. Her name was Maria Santos and she had been with Jack for 6 years. She was calm despite the situation. Good officers stayed calm. "I can count," Jack replied. He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to the lead ship, all frequencies." "Channel open, sir." Jack straightened his uniform and faced the main screen. He did not know what these aliens looked like or what they wanted, but he knew what he had to do. He had to buy time. Every minute he delayed them was another minute for Earth to prepare. "Alien vessels, this is Captain Jack of the Earth ship Relentless. You have entered human territory without authorization. I am requesting your immediate withdrawal to the outer boundary of this solar system. Please respond." The bridge was silent. Everyone waited. Then the screen flickered and an alien face appeared. It was scaled and angular with yellow eyes that held no warmth. The creature studied Jack the way a predator studies prey. "I am commander of the Empire," the alien said. The translation came through slightly delayed but clear. Your request is, Earth and its surrounding space now belong to the Empire. You will stand down and prepare to be boarded. Jack nodded slowly. He had expected this answer. He had hoped for something different, but he had expected this. I cannot do that, Commander. My orders are to defend this territory against all hostile forces. Your fleet is hostile until proven otherwise. Made a sound that might have been laughter. You are one ship, we are 300, your defense is meaningless. Maybe, Jack said, but I took an oath, I do not break my oaths. Stared at him for a long moment. Something flickered in those yellow eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or confusion. Disable their vessel, ordered someone off screen. Do not destroy it. I want this captain alive. I want to understand why he chooses death over wisdom. The channel closed. Maria looked at Jack with steady eyes. Orders, Captain. Jack took a deep breath. He thought about his children and his. He thought about every person on Earth who was counting on the Navy to protect them. He had always known this day might come. He had always known that service meant sacrifice. All hands, this is the captain. We are about to engage a superior enemy force. Our mission is to delay them as long as possible and to show them what happens when they threaten our home. It has been an honor serving with each of you. The first volley from the fleet struck the Relentless like a hammer. The ship shook violently as shields failed and hull plates tore away. Explosions rippled through the lower decks. Damage reports flooded in. 30 dead, then 50, then 100. The Relentless fired back with everything it had. Missiles and energy beams lanced out toward the enemy fleet. Most were intercepted or absorbed by alien shields. A few struck home, damaging smaller vessels, but it was not enough. It could never be enough. Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, Maria reported. Her voice remained calm even as blood ran down her face from a cut above her eye. Engines at 30%, weapons failing. Jack gripped the arms of his command chair. His ship was dying around him. His crew was dying around him. But they had stopped advancing. They were focused on the Relentless, watching this tiny ship fight against impossible odds. Navigation set a collision course for the enemy flagship. Maximum acceleration. The navigation officer, a young man named Peter Grant, turned to look at Jack. His hands trembled, but he did not hesitate. Collision course set, Captain. Maximum acceleration on your order. Maria stepped closer to Jack. The reactor, sir. Jack nodded. Overload it. Time the detonation for impact. The Relentless surged forward. Damaged and burning and falling apart, it accelerated toward the ascending shadow with the last of its power. The fired again and again. Pieces of the human ship broke away and tumbled into space. The bridge lost pressure and emergency snapped into place. Jack opened the communication channel one more time. He wanted to see him. He wanted the alien commander to remember this moment. Commander, you should have listened to the Galactic Council. The Relentless struck the ascending shadow at full speed. In the same instant, the reactor core overloaded with the force of a small star. The explosion consumed both ships in a sphere of white-hot fire. The blast wave rolled outward and caught 17 support vessels, tearing them apart before they could react. Lieutenant watched from a secondary vessel positioned far from the flagship. She saw the explosion bloom and fade. She saw the debris field that had been 200 humans and their captain. She saw the remains of the ascending shadow, the mightiest warship in the fleet, reduced to twisted metal and ash. Commander was dead. The crew of the ascending shadow was dead, and a single human ship with a single human captain had killed them. His hands shook as she processed what she had witnessed. The humans had been by a factor of 5,000 to 1. They had no chance of victory, no chance of survival. They knew this. Their captain knew this. And they attacked anyway. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They did not beg for mercy or try to negotiate. They flew directly into death and dragged their enemies with them. This was not desperation, had seen desperate species before. They ran. They hid. They did whatever was necessary to survive another day. This was something else. This was a choice, a deliberate decision to transform defeat into damage, to make the enemy pay for every victory with blood. Thought about the Council's warning. She thought about thee and their empty worlds. She understood now why they had fallen. You could not defeat an enemy who did not fear death. You could not conquer a species that saw defeat as simply another weapon to use against you. The remaining fleet regrouped under new command. The invasion would continue. They had come too far to turn back now. But something had changed. They had lost their certainty. They had lost their confidence. They had seen what one human ship could do when pushed to the edge. They had not yet seen what an entire planet could do. General had conquered 12 worlds before Earth. He had led ground invasions against species that were stronger than his soldiers and species that were smarter. He had fought in jungles and deserts and frozen wastelands. He had never lost a campaign, and he did not intend to start now. The landing craft descended through Earth's atmosphere like metal rain, thousands of them carrying hundreds of thousands of soldiers. They landed in the region humans called the American Midwest, a vast flat expanse of farmland and small cities. Had chosen this location because it offered clear sight lines and easy movement for his armored vehicles. The humans would have nowhere to hide. The first week went exactly as expected. Human military forces engaged his troops in open battle and lost. Soldiers were larger and stronger than humans. Weapons were more powerful and accurate. Armor could withstand most human projectiles. The humans fell back, retreating toward their cities, leaving their dead behind. Reported his progress to the fleet commanders in orbit. The invasion was proceeding on schedule. Earth would fall within the month. Then the second week began. Sergeant Kate Miller had been a soldier for 9 years. She had served 2 tours in foreign countries and received 3 commendations for bravery. She was 31 years old, and she had a younger brother named Sam who worked as a teacher in Ohio. She thought about Sam often during those dark days. She thought about what would happen to him if the aliens won. Kate commanded a squad of 12 soldiers. They had been part of a larger battalion that was destroyed in the first week of fighting. Now they were alone behind enemy lines, cut off from command, low on ammunition and food. Most officers would have ordered a retreat. Kate was not most officers. "We cannot beat them in a straight fight," she told her squad. They were hiding in the basement of an abandoned farmhouse, watching patrols move along the highway outside. "So we do not fight them straight. We hit them where they are weak. Supply lines, communication relays, officers traveling between units." Private Danny, the youngest member of the squad, raised his hand. He was 22 and he had only been a soldier for 14 months. "How do we do that with 12 people and limited ammo?" Kate smiled. It was not a happy smile. "We get creative." For the next 3 days, Kate's squad moved through the countryside like ghosts. They planted explosives on bridges that convoys used. They poisoned water supplies at enemy camps. They cut communication cables and jammed radio frequencies. They killed sentries in the night and disappeared before reinforcements arrived. The grew frustrated. They sent hunting parties to find the humans responsible. Kate led them into traps, ambushes in narrow ravines, minefields in open meadows, buildings rigged to collapse. On the 4th day, a battalion finally cornered Kate's squad in a small town called Riverside. 300 alien soldiers surrounded a hardware store where 12 humans had made their last stand. Himself came to oversee the capture. He wanted to see these humans who had caused so much trouble. He sent a message through his translator. "Surrender now and you will be treated as prisoners of war. Continue fighting and you will die." Kate's voice came back through a broken window. "We are not surrendering. Come and get us." Ordered his troops to advance. They moved carefully, expecting traps. They were right to expect them. The first explosion took out 20 soldiers. The second killed 15 more. The hardware store was filled with propane tanks and fertilizer and every chemical that could be turned into a weapon. Kate and her squad had spent the night preparing. They pulled back and regrouped. They brought up heavy weapons and began bombarding the building. Walls collapsed. The roof caved in. Fires spread through the wreckage. When the shooting finally stopped, sent scouts to confirm the kills. They found 11 human bodies in the rubble. Kate Miller was not among them. She emerged from a drainage tunnel 50 meters behind the line. She was burned and bleeding, and one of her arms hung useless at her side. In her good hand, she held a detonator. She had planted explosives under the street the night before. They were standing directly above them. Kate pressed the button. 94 soldiers died in the blast, including 3 of senior officers. Kate Miller died as well, buried in the crater her final act had created. Stood at the edge of the destruction and tried to understand what had happened. 12 humans had killed nearly 200 of his soldiers. One wounded woman had destroyed almost 100 more with her dying breath. This was not how war was supposed to work. The pattern repeated across every battlefield on Earth. In the mountains of Colorado, a group of civilians held a pass against forces for 16 days using hunting rifles and homemade bombs. In the swamps of Louisiana, human fighters ambushed patrols and vanished into water too shallow for vehicles. In the ruins of Chicago, snipers turned every building into a death trap. Private Danny survived the battle at Riverside. He escaped through the same tunnel Kate used and spent the next 11 days alone behind enemy lines. He had no food, no medicine, and only a knife he had taken from a dead soldier. He killed 43 enemies during those 11 days. He strangled sentries. He poisoned food supplies. He set fires in ammunition depots. He became a legend among the human resistance and a nightmare for patrols. When they finally captured him, Danny was too weak to stand. He had lost 30 pounds and his wounds had become infected. The interrogators demanded to know how many other humans were operating in the area. Danny spat blood in their faces and told them that every human was a soldier, every man and woman and child. They would never hold Earth because Earth did not want to be held. The interrogators beat him for 3 hours. He never gave them a single name. General reviewed his casualty reports at the end of the first month. He had expected to lose perhaps 5,000 soldiers in the entire campaign. He had lost 40,000. His supply lines were constantly disrupted. His officers were being assassinated. His troops were afraid to sleep because humans attacked at all hours. The humans should have surrendered by now. Their cities were burning. Their armies were shattered. Their government had fled underground. By every measure that mattered, they had lost. But they kept fighting. They fought from rubble and forests. They fought with stolen weapons and kitchen knives. They fought with their bare hands when nothing else remained. Began to understand what the Galactic Council had tried to tell them. Humans did not know how to surrender. It was not a choice they made. It was something deeper, something built into their very nature. He wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. He wondered if this invasion would end the same way the invasion had ended. He wondered if he would live to find out. Lieutenant had not slept properly in weeks. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the explosion that killed Commander. She saw the human captain's face in the final transmission. She saw the calm certainty in his eyes as he drove his dying ship into the heart of the fleet. She had requested a transfer from combat duty to intelligence analysis. The new fleet commander, Admiral, had granted her request. He recognized that had a sharp mind and that they needed to understand their enemy before they could defeat them. Began her research in the archives of the Galactic Council. The records were ancient and vast, stretching back millions of years to the earliest spacefaring civilizations. She searched for any information about Earth and its inhabitants. What she found kept her awake for different reasons. Humans had evolved on a planet that should have killed them. Earth was what called a death world. It had extreme temperature variations, violent weather systems, and an atmosphere filled with corrosive oxygen. The planet was covered in predators that could tear humans apart with tooth and claw. The oceans held creatures of nightmare size. Even the smallest life forms carried diseases that could devastate populations. Yet humans had not only survived, they had thrived. They had risen from prey animals to apex predators in a fraction of the time it took most species. They had spread across every continent, adapted to every climate, and eventually reached beyond their planet to touch the stars. Read about human history and felt something she had never felt before: fear. Humans had been at war with themselves since before they developed writing. They fought over territory and resources and beliefs, and sometimes for reasons they could not explain. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization not once but multiple times. They had stood at the edge of self-extinction and pulled back, but only barely. They had known conflict. All species had, but they fought for logical reasons. They sought resources, territory, strategic advantage. When a war became too costly, they negotiated. They accepted partial victories. They chose survival over pride. Humans did not think this way. Found records of human soldiers who held defensive positions for days without food or water or hope of rescue. She read about pilots who flew into enemy fire to protect their comrades. She discovered stories of prisoners who endured years of torture without revealing secrets. She learned about doctors who ran toward explosions while everyone else ran away. One case study haunted her more than the others. During a human conflict called World War II, a single soldier named Das refused to carry a weapon because of his religious beliefs. He served as a medic instead. During one battle, his unit was overwhelmed and forced to retreat, leaving dozens of wounded soldiers behind. Das stayed. Alone and unarmed, he moved through the battlefield under enemy fire. He carried wounded soldiers to safety one at a time, lowering them down a cliff to friendly positions below. He saved 75 lives that day. When asked later how he found the courage, he said he simply prayed for God to help him save one more. They had no concept of this. Their culture valued survival above all else. A soldier who remained behind to save others would be considered mentally damaged. The needs of the individual were always secondary to the needs of the collective, but the collective was protected through strategic withdrawal and preservation of forces. Humans protected their collective through sacrifice, through individuals who gave everything so others might live. Expanded her research to human mythology and religion. She found that nearly every human culture had stories about heroes who died for their people, gods who suffered for humanity, ordinary people who became extraordinary through the act of giving up their lives. Sacrifice was not merely accepted in human society, it was celebrated. It was considered the highest form of love. She studied human biology next. She learned about adrenaline, a chemical that flooded human bodies during moments of extreme stress. It suppressed pain and fear. It increased strength and reaction time. It allowed humans to perform physical feats that should have been impossible. But more than that, she learned about human psychology. Humans formed emotional bonds with incredible speed and intensity. They could love strangers they had never met. They could feel genuine pain at the suffering of people on the other side of their planet. They developed attachment to abstract concepts like freedom and justice and home. These attachments could override every survival instinct. A human who believed strongly enough in something would die for it without hesitation, not because they wanted to die, but because they wanted what they loved to survive. Compiled her findings and presented them to Admiral and the remaining commanders. They gathered in a conference room aboard the new flagship, a vessel that had been kept far from Earth orbit after what happened to the ascending shadow. Humans evolved on a death world, began. Their planet tried to kill them every day of their existence. Only the most determined survived. Only those willing to fight against impossible odds lived long enough to reproduce. She showed them images of Earth, volcanic eruptions and hurricanes and predators with claws the length of arms. They developed pack bonding as a survival mechanism. Humans do not see themselves as individuals first. They see themselves as parts of groups, families, communities, nations, species. They will die for these groups without hesitation because their psychology tells them that the group's survival is more important than their own. She showed them the battle recordings from the invasion. Human soldiers charging into certain death. Civilians throwing themselves at patrols with nothing but rocks and farming tools. They experience something called adrenaline that allows them to ignore pain and fear in moments of crisis. They can continue fighting with wounds that would incapacitate any soldier. They can push their bodies far beyond normal limits when they believe the cause is worth it. She paused and looked at the commanders around the table. "We cannot break them," she said quietly. "Pain does not stop them. Fear does not stop them. Death does not stop them. Any victory we achieve will be temporary because survivors will never accept defeat. They will teach their children to fight. They will rebuild and grow stronger. They will hunt us across the galaxy if necessary." Admiral leaned forward. "What are you saying, Lieutenant?" Took a deep breath. "I am saying that the Galactic Council was right. Humans do not know how to surrender. It is not a choice they make. It is who they are. We can kill millions of them. We can destroy their cities and occupy their planet, but we cannot conquer them. We will only create an enemy that will never stop until either they are completely extinct or we are." The room was silent for a long time. "They tried to exterminate them," continued. "They failed. Humans breed faster than they can be killed, and every human death creates more humans willing to die for revenge." She displayed her final calculation, the projected cost of completely eliminating humanity. The numbers were staggering. It would take centuries. It would consume the entire military. It might not even be possible. "What do you recommend?" asked. Met his eyes. "I recommend we find another way, before it is too late. 3 years had passed since the first entered Earth's solar system. 3 years of blood and fire and death. The blue planet that had dismissed as weak and fragile had become a nightmare that haunted every soldier who survived. The invasion force that had numbered in the hundreds of thousands was now reduced to scattered remnants. 60% of their soldiers were dead. The rest were exhausted, demoralized, and afraid. They controlled small pockets of territory, but they could not hold them. Every night brought new attacks. Every morning brought new casualties. Earth was, great cities lay in ruins. Forests had burned. Rivers ran thick with ash. Billions of humans had died defending their home. But the resistance had never stopped. It had grown stronger with each passing month. Human factories, hidden underground, produced weapons and ammunition around the clock. Human scientists developed new technologies adapted from captured equipment. Human soldiers trained in guerrilla tactics that turned every shadow into a threat. Admiral looked out at the planet from his flagship and knew that the war was lost, not because they lacked the power to continue fighting. They could bomb Earth from orbit until nothing lived on its surface, but that would prove nothing except that they were capable of murder on a planetary scale. It would not be conquest. It would be extermination. Ant's words haunted him. Humans breed faster than they can be killed. There were human colonies on the Moon and Mars. There were human ships scattered across the solar system. Even if Earth burned, humanity would survive, and they would come for them with a rage that would span generations. Requested a meeting with human leadership. General Amy received the message in a bunker 300 meters below what used to be Denver, Colorado. She was 58 years old and she had commanded human resistance forces for the last 2 years. Her hair had turned white during that time. Her hands shook from stress and exhaustion, but her eyes remained sharp and her voice remained steady. She agreed to the meeting. They met aboard a neutral station that orbited between Earth and Mars. The station had been built by the Galactic Council as a place for civilizations to negotiate without threat. It was considered sacred ground. Violence was forbidden within its walls. Amy brought a small delegation. Her aide, Colonel Ben Hayes, walked beside her. Ben had lost his wife and 2 daughters in the initial invasion. He had fought for 3 years without rest. He had every reason to hate them more than any human alive. Yet when he entered the negotiation chamber and saw Admiral waiting, his face showed no anger, only exhaustion, only a desperate hope that this might finally end. Rose as the humans entered. He was tall even for with scales that had darkened with age and eyes that held something that might have been respect. "General," he said through his translator, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Amy sat down across from him. "You asked, I listened, talk." Placed his hands flat on the table, a gesture of openness among his people. "The Empire wishes to withdraw from Earth and its solar system. We will provide reparations for the damage we have caused. We will return all human prisoners without condition. We ask only one thing in exchange." Amy raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "An explanation," leaned forward. "Help us understand. Every species we have conquered has broken eventually. Every civilization has reached a point where continued resistance became meaningless. Why not humans? How do you endure what no other species can endure?" Amy was silent for a long moment. She thought about the last 3 years. She thought about the soldiers who had died under her command. She thought about Kate Miller and Danny and Captain Jack. She thought about every human who had given everything so that others might live. Then she told about her grandfather. His name was William. He fought in a war called Vietnam when he was 19 years old. He was captured by enemy forces and held prisoner for 6 years. Listened without interrupting. They tortured him. They starved him. They broke his bones and infected his wounds and tried everything they could think of to make him give up information about his fellow soldiers. 6 years of pain that I cannot imagine and you cannot understand. Amy's voice grew soft but did not waver. When he was finally released, he came home. He married my grandmother. They had 3 children, including my mother. He worked as a carpenter for 40 years. He went to church every Sunday. He coached Little League baseball. He lived a full life surrounded by people who loved him. She looked directly at. And he never stopped smiling. Not once. Even at the end, when cancer was eating him alive, he smiled at his family and told jokes and said he had no regrets. I asked him once how that was possible. How could he be happy after everything they did to him? Amy paused, remembering her grandfather's weathered face, his kind eyes, his gentle hands that had built furniture and held children and never raised in anger. He told me that the enemy could hurt his body. They could break his bones and scar his skin, but there was a part of him they could never touch. He called it his soul, the part that believed in something bigger than himself, the part that loved his country and his family and his God. They could not reach it because it did not exist in his body. It existed somewhere else, somewhere they could not go. Did not respond immediately. The concept was foreign to thinking. They believed in the physical world, in matter and energy and things that could be measured. "I do not fully understand," he admitted. "I know," Amy said, "but that is your answer. Humans have souls. They are not logical and they cannot be, but they are real and they are indestructible. You can destroy our bodies. You can burn our cities. You can kill everything we love, but you cannot touch the part of us that refuses to give up. It will survive. It will always survive." The negotiations concluded 3 days later. The fleet from Earth's solar system. They left behind equipment and supplies as partial reparations. They released every human prisoner, including Danny, who had spent 2 years in captivity without ever breaking. Before leaving, Admiral transmitted a warning to every spacefaring civilization in the galaxy. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, repeated in every known language. Earth is protected. Humanity is not to be engaged under any circumstances. They are the universe's last defense because they are the only species that will fight until the very last individual falls, and somehow they will find a way to keep fighting even after that. Lieutenant, now commanding her own vessel, read the message as her ship passed Earth's orbit for the final time. She looked at the blue planet through her viewing port. It was and wounded, but it was healing. Human ships were already launching from its surface, reaching toward the stars. She understood now what made humans different. It was not their technology or their strength or their numbers. It was something intangible, something that existed in the space between measurable things. They called it madness. The Galactic Council called it a mystery. Humans called it the heart. And it was unbreakable.